Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Jay Wilson, and I am a content creator for all things related to Domo. And today I wanted to tackle a question that came out of the user community about building a DomoStats style dataset that gives you the actions that are in a data flow. Now, before we kick off with all of this, I'm going to assume that you know a little bit about programming. I don't have the time to just like walk through it super slowly, but the code is available in my GitHub repository here under, if you find jwilson07 Domo Library, if you go to the About page, you can see documentation about this library that I used to write this data set. But here under blog is a link to the tutorial. Great. The final product, in case we're wondering what it's going to look like, the final product will look like this, Mark's data set. And it's pretty basic. It just has the data flow ID, the name of the data flow, and the types of actions that were used in that data flow, because that's what Mark asked for. Okay. This tutorial was part of a Domo user group community call that we host every Friday. You know, in Slack, obviously you can post your questions, exchange ideas, but we also really want people to join our community calls on Friday. Ben Shine was on to kind of talk about the future of some interesting developments in cards and stuff that I'm not going to talk about on this video. But Ben Shine shows up, and sometimes other folks from product are there to kind of, you know, give us their 10 cents or give us an opportunity to gripe about some latest thing that we don't like. So if that sounds interesting to you, hit me up on Slack. We'll get you in that into that call. All right, let me just get straight into the code here. So like I said, I've written this two different ways, one using Domo Library and then one without Domo Library. First things first is you have to get your credentials in, right? We have to use username and password authentication to hit these undocumented APIs. If you don't know anything about that, I've got tons of YouTube videos, recent ones, where I've gone through the full auth workflow and how that all works. But I think the most important thing that people forget is sometimes they put their username and password on the internet. Guys, please don't do that. So instead, use an existing library called load.env, which will allow you to create an env text file, which you'll then git ignore, so you don't post it to GitHub. But that will store your username and password so that you don't accidentally send stuff to people that you don't need to be. An alternative way of handling username and kind of secret credentials is you can use DomoJupyter's accounts objects. And I have an object called fake account, which basically just allows you to store stuff in an account object that is secure. So I might say, oh, well, I've got Domo password. Oh gosh, that's not good. That's what was that from, Romeo and Juliet? But okay, we'll set that aside. So we'll say capulets@gmail.com. Okay. I don't know why that was on my mind in this moment, but anyway, okay. So I can create a abstract account object type and basically store a blob or a dictionary. It does have to be spelled correctly, so don't misspell things. And then what you do is you come over to your Jupyter workspace and you would, please don't do that. Come over to your Jupyter workspace, edit it, and then here under accounts, you can share that account object with your workspace and then make the contents of that account available in your workspace. So for us, what does that look like? Over here, I can now see the account's fake account is there. And if I wanted to, I can use Domo's DomoJupyter library to import the credentials. Yeah, so Domo get account property. This is me using the proper account object to read in the credentials as a JSON object, and now I can do credentials.get and credentials.get. I guess I can just show you what happens if I double click here is Give me a little more real estate. Okay, so I can say get account properties value from fake account. I want to get the property called credentials. And then I can just print that on our screen here. So I can prove to you that my code actually runs. And there it is, right? This is just a string. I can tell because it begins and ends with a single tick. So I'm going to do import JSON and JSON.load string. And that's going to convert it into now a dictionary. And that would be my credentials dictionary. Okay, moving on. So I have my username and password loaded into Domo. Now, how do I handle authentication? I'm going to use a full auth workflow. I've got this documented, like I said, in other tutorial videos, but the gist of it is you hit this API with this body, and then it will return you a session token. Fantastic. Here's the thing. As you write code, you should try to build error handling into your code. What if you ask for something that doesn't exist? Like in our case, what if I send the incorrect credentials? What if my account is locked? What if the Domo instance doesn't exist? A good API will give you different responses for any of those three use cases. And you, as a developer, should probably throw different exceptions if you didn't, for each of those different account type or error types, right? So you might have an if statement that says if the response is account locked, then throw one kind of error. And if it's something else, throw a different kind of error. We really want to throw these errors because you wouldn't want to run this code every day with the wrong credentials. So that's something to think about. My library has a class called Domo Full Auth. It is in the Domo Auth module. And Domo Auth will receive a username, password, and instance, and you can run the function print is token. It will say, hey, successfully retrieved a token. And if you don't successfully retrieve a token, it will also throw some errors. Again, all of this is documented here under Domo Library GitHub.io. If I go to classes and I look for the auth, no, it's under client, sorry. Clients, where are my clients? Yes, under Domo Auth, under client, I can see I support Domo Full Auth. I support Domo Token Authentication, which is the access token. And if you're doing client ID secret stuff, I have a workflow for that as well. Right? All of this is nicely documented, and you can go to the source code to actually see the source code if you wanted to, and how the error handling works and all of that stuff. By the way, if you decide to use this library, I use this every day for work. So if there are issues, and it looks like I've got 7 open issues that I'm working through, some of them have been reported by me. Most of them have been reported by me. Right, I'm working on this literally every day. So my library works. Or if it doesn't, it gets fixed very quickly. And I'm super responsive. Like if someone reports an error or whatever, I'm happy to get that taken care of. Good. Full auth. Okay, so we figured out authentication. First question is how do I retrieve the data? And data retrieval actually has a couple of steps, right? What did Mark say he wanted? He said he wanted a data set that said, what are the tiles in use in my ETL? So how am I going to answer that? Well, first thing we need to think about is okay, well, where is that data going to come from? Where in the user interface have I seen the data represented, and can I reverse engineer the API to get that information? Some things to think about is, well, how am I going to handle looping, right? How can I make my code run fast enough? Is one request actually going to be enough, or am I going to have to hit 2 or 3 different APIs? So I think one thing I would strongly recommend you get in the habit of, especially if you're doing Domo, is like, how do I click through this on the screen in order to get this to happen? So if I said, hey, I want to see all of my data flows, I would go to the data center. I would monitor network traffic. That's the important part. I would monitor network traffic, go over to data flows, and maybe apply the appropriate filter to show me my magic ETLs. All right. when I do that, what actually happens here in network traffic? Okay, I see a bunch of GET requests and I see a POST request. I happen to know that we're looking for the POST request. And in the request body, it says, okay, I want to search for data flows. I want to filter where the data flow type is Magic ETL v2. And I'm not interested in Redshift. I don't know why that's explicitly there, but okay. And I know that if I hit the query API with a POST request with that body, the response will include a bunch of search objects. Where are my search objects? Here we go. And so what's in that search object? Okay, it has an entity ID of data flow, database ID of 340. Does it look like what I'm looking for? I mean, it matches what's in the user interface, so great. Okay, demo active employees. Is that something that I see? Yep, demo active employees. Fantastic. But does it have my actions? It has input and output data sets, but does it have actions? And no, it doesn't have actions. Okay. It doesn't have actions. So that tells me I have to hit another API. Does it actually list all of my objects, or does it only list 29 of them? Okay, 29 seems awfully specific. So in this context, it probably has all of them. But if I look at the request body, it does have a count. Does it have an offset and an offset? So count and offset will always imply looping or pagination, where I return a set of responses and then kind of like Facebook with infinite scrolling, right? When you go to your Facebook wall, it doesn't show everything that you've ever posted. It just shows you like 25, and then as you scroll down, it shows you some more, and as you scroll some more, it shows, right, okay, infinite scrolling is handled with pagination, i.e. looping. Cool. Well, what API is actually going to give me the definition or tell me what actions there are? Well, go to the place where you see actions and then look for, let's see, this is 340, so I'm going to search for 340. If I send a GET request to here, do I get a response with actions? Okay, so I have to go to a different endpoint. And in this endpoint, I actually have to pass the data flow ID. All right, so again, break this down. What do I need? I need a place that will give me a list of all of my data flow IDs. Then I need to go to a different endpoint that will give me the definition of the data flow per data flow ID. Right? As you say these things out loud, it kind of gives you an idea of how we're going to put this script together, I hope. So here we go. We have a function called query data center that will hit my data center endpoint with a post request and pass in the right body for filtering on Magic ETL data flows. My generate query or my query body has to have the count and offset as well as the correct filter parameters. The count, the body will also determine the pagination element, right? Okay, so let's assume this all works. What does it look like when it all comes together? Can I just, is this still loaded? Yeah, okay. So let's do this. So if I run my function generate body with a count of 10 and an offset of 0, I get the response of just like a dictionary that has the right filter criteria for hitting the query API. Fantastic. So then when I actually hit the data center API, I'll get back a list of 10 data flows, and I'm just going to print the output of that first data flow. So I can see, aha, data flow, database ID. And just like in the browser, okay, it has a name, it has a description, it has an owner, but it doesn't have the actions. Okay, Let's come over to my DomoLibrary implementation. DomoLibrary does the same thing. I have a class called Domo Data Center. It receives the auth object, which handles username and password authentication. It has a method called search data center, and I just have to pass in the filters that I want. But you'll notice here that it doesn't have anything about offset or limit. And that's because this method has looping built into it, so you don't have to worry about it. So when I run this function, I think it should, oh, I should just say, what is the length? That's what we want to know. What is the length? Oh, did I not run authentication? Just kidding. Okay, how far back do I have to go? Can we just work the first time, please? Okay, yep. All right, so it retrieves all 175 data flows where it's magic ETL type v2. Cool. I mean, that's kind of powerful, guys. Like, looping is taken care of. You don't have to think about it. Okay. Once I have a list of data flows, what do I need from this part of the puzzle? I just need the database ID. So I say I have a list comprehension that for each data flow object in the list, retrieve the database ID. And here I'm just printing out the first 5. Fantastic. What was the next step? Now for each data flow ID, I need to get the data flow definition. Okay, how do we get the data flow definition? We need to hit this endpoint, which we know from sniffing network traffic. I'll pass in the data flow ID. It's a GET request, so there's no body. I do have to handle authentication, and then I'm just going to return the JSON definition, which looks like this. So here's the data flow ID. Here are the actions. Bam, looking good. Am I still recording audio properly? Yeah, we're good. Okay. And here are the actions. Load from vault, expression evaluator, publish to vault. Those are all actions. In the library side, we have a class called DomoDataFlow, or a module called DomoDataFlow with the class. And then I call a method getFromID, wherein you pass a dataflow ID, pass an auth object, and it returns to you an instance of DomoDataFlow. Cool. So here's the exact same thing as we saw in the other version. Its ID is 131. That's the name of the data flow. I can see that it gives me a nice link that I could click on to, oh, that's the authentication, ignore that. Here are the actions. So load from vault, governance, and the expression evaluator. And you might say, Jay, Domo data flow action, that's not represented in the JSON object. You are correct. One of the nice things about classes is classes can be comprised of multiple classes. So the Domo data flow can have another class related to it called Domo data flow action. And the nice thing about that is each of these classes could have methods or functions associated with them. I might have a function called getFromID. I might have a function called executeDataFlow. If I was dealing with datasets, I might have a function called uploadData, createPartition, deletePartition. And the nice thing about this class-based approach is that you, as the end user, you don't really have to know much. You just have to come over to the documentation, go over to dataflow, and then take a look at some of the actions that you can have in a data flow. So there's a function called or a method called executeDataFlow, for example. In case you're wondering, my version of the code took literally half the time it took to build this all from scratch, which might not sound like a lot, but I've done this before. So if you've never done this before, the time to getting a data set done could be significant. Just throwing that out there. Anyway, so we get our data flow definition, and that's all great. So now we're at a new state of the puzzle, right? We have a plan for how we're going to get the data. The question is, how are you going to present the data? And I think, it's really easy to rag on DomoStats or Domo governance and say, this this data set isn't complete. I wish they gave me data the way I wanted it shaped. And that's the interesting part, the way you want it shaped. Think about it. Mark's question was, I want to know all of the data sets that are using a data science tile. What does that look like? What is the granularity of the data? What should one row of your data set represent? Is it one row per data set with like a binary column for all of the different kinds of tiles and just a 1 or a 0? Or is it one row per data set per tile? Or is it one row per data set per tile type, right? Like what if you're using the formula tile 5 or 6 times in your ETL? Do you want the formula tile represented 5 or 6 times in your data set in rows or in columns? So again, I think it's really easy to just have this nebulous ask. The follow-up question is like, okay, well, how are you going to get the data? Once you get the data, how are you going to present the data? And that's I think part of the challenge with the Domo governance and DomoStats data set. And so it's easy to get frustrated, but I also have to cut them some slack for like, well, somebody had to make a decision, and maybe I don't like it, but somebody had to make a decision on how the data is presented. We already know the answer, though. The right way to present the data, obviously, is the way that I did it. Giggle, giggle. But the final data set is going to be one row per data flow ID. Give me the name and the action type. So coming back to our code, we take a data set. We take a data flow object. We get the actions, and then we extract the ID, name, and type. You'll see I run it through the set operation, which says just a unique list of these things. Actually, the set operator, I think, is in the wrong place. It is, but we'll talk about that another time. Cool. So the get action list will take one data flow and give me a list of actions. And then I'll run a list comprehension over a list of all of the data flows. So the end result, action list, is actually going to be a list of lists. Oh man, do I need to run all of these? I haven't run these, sorry. I haven't been keeping up with my run button. Okay, just run it all. Do I have an error someplace? When did I introduce an error? Yo, no way. Oh man, I don't want my code to be broken. Restart and run all, please. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that hiccup. I don't print all of them. Okay, so we're here. Get action list. Oh Lord. See, I do not want to be debugging code right now. Okay, here's data flow definition list. Okay, so get the object. Oh yeah, this set operation, like I said, it's in the wrong place. Okay, the set operation should be at the end. And then we're going to take this set and convert it into a list. Disregard, we're going to ignore this set operation altogether because I'm not debugging code live. Now I'm curious how you would handle. Oh yeah, turn it into a string and then it's okay. Anyway, blah blah blah. We get a list. Okay. So where we were at is we said once I call the get action list function on each data flow, I'll end up with a list of lists, and you can't pd.dataframe that. So I need to flatten it. So for each list inside of a data flow definition, I need to flatten it. And so we use what's called another list comprehension, but this time it's a nested list comprehension. So action list is a list of lists, and this will be a list of actions. And then for each action in my list of actions, just return the action. So that will flatten it, and I know it's flattened because it doesn't have the double square brackets. If that made sense, great. If it doesn't, think about it. We're almost done, guys. Thanks for sticking around to the end of this video. If you've liked it, please like and subscribe. Do all of the things. Let me know in Slack if you want to join the community channel. I'll have links to the description and the GitHub and all of that. But also, there is a link to Venmo. If you want to help support my content creation habit, please feel free to, send a couple bucks this way if I saved you some time. Anyway, we're going to take our data frame and we're convert it into data frame using pandas. Or if you want to use Domo infrastructure, you can output your data set using the Domo library or DomoJupyter, which I'll show you in just a second. On our side, the actions for converting a class into the data set are pretty much the same, right? In my get action list, though, instead of using that's .get notation, these are all attributes of the data flow or the action, so I can just use dot notation to retrieve the ID, name, and type. I still have to deal with the list of lists, so again, we do the double list comprehension, and again, we're in the same place. To write my data set to DomoJupyter, or as a DomoJupyter data set, though, I have the DomoJupyter library, and I have a function called write data frame that will allow me to send a data frame to the data set. This is actually kind of cool. Pause for a moment and think about this. Write data frame actually has at least 4 actions. So the first action is to say, okay, I've received a data frame, which has pandas data types. How do I convert that into Domo data types? So there has to be some sort of an infer or derive schema process built into write data frame. Then it says, oh, okay, well, I can translate Mark's data set into a data set ID, but I need to be able to upload my data. So I need an upload ID. Then I need to actually upload the ID, the data set, the data frame, and then I need to index the data set. So this write data frame function, again, is hitting 4 or 5 APIs. Like you never thought about it, but that's actually happening. And again, that to me is kind of the value add of the class-based approach to writing your functions. Instead of writing the URL every time, trust that Jay Wilson will take care of it if Domo changes the URL. And if the body required changes, like trust that this library will take care of the thing. Or if you don't trust, and rightfully so, you don't know me from Adam. So you also have the ability to go into roots. So for each class, I also have the roots, which makes it very transparent how stuff is happening. So I have a root called get data flow by ID, and I can show you an example of how it works, but you can also go to the source code when the links work. I promise it exists. We can go to roots and go to data flow, and I can see the source code for how all of these functions are written and designed and intended to work. Cool. At the end of the day, we end up with a data set, but actually we're not really done yet. The last step is to automate it. So I can go in here and schedule this notebook to run on a schedule. And what that does is it creates a data flow in the data center based off of that Jupyter notebook. So if I come in here, I can see that I have a DomoStats data flow. Guys, do not build custom connectors in Domo anymore. There's no reason, in my opinion. If you have DomoJupyter and I can write Python to create connectors, custom connectors. Why would I bother with the IDE that doesn't have, okay, I'm not going to bash the IDE. My point is use a DomoStats, DomoJupyter to create. Do I still exist? Yes. Use DomoJupyter to automate whether it's script execution or creation of new data sets, and go forth and do great things. I think, as I wrap this up, because I am feeling done talking, I think as I wrap this up, if you break this down into steps, question number one is, can I even get the data from APIs? And the answer almost certainly is yes. And someone in the community, probably me, has the answer to how you retrieve data using APIs. The follow-up question is, how do you want to shape the data to meet your use case, or ideally be flexible enough to meet multiple use cases? So how do you shape the output once you have the data? And I think that's the harder part. And again, that's why we need to look at how DomoStats and Domo governance approach things, maybe decide what we love, what we hate, and take it from there. My name's Jay Wilson. You can reach out to me in the Slack group. I hope you guys found this useful. Good luck. Have fun. Catch you later.